tonight, along with millions of Americans, we do celebrate the end of the Mueller investigation and the vindication of President Trump. Now, we told you from day one this was an investigation triggered by people who wanted to undo the results of the 2016 election. We told you week after week after week that this probe should have never been launched. And Mueller's findings of no collusion or coordination with Russia shows that we were right, and the bitter, nasty anti-Trump forces were wrong. And how wrong were they?
They were conspiring with Russians, a criminal conspiracy possibly.
False reporting is saying that nobody in the campaign had any contacts with Russia. False reporting is saying that there has been no suggestion of any kind of collusion.
How many more times does he have to say the word collusion? That's probably because he feels he colluded.
Yeah, it's not enough to play these sound bites and laugh, although it is fun. Because after these 2 turbulent years, America deserves more than just a day or two of media analysis and one fair headline from the New York Times today. America deserves to know what really happened here, the forces, the individuals, and the motivations behind this total travesty of justice. And we must ensure that those responsible face real political, legal, and professional repercussions.
We can never let this happen to another president again. I can tell you that, and I say it very strongly. Very few people I know could have handled it. We can never, ever let this happen to another president again.
These past 675 days were filled with unfair, slanderous, defamatory, vicious, irresponsible, and erroneous reporting and commentary about this president, and also about his current and former staff, and yes, his family.
There was activities with the Trump campaign in Russia, and some of that was Jared Kushner's responsibilities. Some of it was Donald Jr. I think you're going to probably see indictments of both of those people.
We know that Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump have bragged about how much money the Trump organization has gotten out of Russia.
Anytime there was collusion going on, Donnie was there. This sad, sticky wad of congealed hair gel has spent his whole life seeking his dad's approval and failing at it. And now he might be the one to bring down Trump's presidency.
Oh, Samantha, be best. Well, throughout the show, we're going to be naming names in the Russia investigation Hall of Shame. We will not forget, and neither should you, those who acted and spoke with such a reckless disregard of the truth and basic standards of professionalism. There must be a reckoning. It's time to hold government officials, reporters, pundits, media executives, and yes, politicians accountable for their role in this Russia hoax. Now, we start with the Russia hoax political Hall of Shame. And why not begin with Senator Tricky Dick Blumenthal from my home state of Connecticut? Now, this was then, when he could talk only of the possible Moscow Trump Tower deal and Russian collusion.
The project never happened, but not for lack of trying and not for lack of desire. The Russians knew that he was lying to the American people. They enabled him. And now they have that leverage over him. So he's compromised.
Who's compromised now, Dick? But now, with the end of the Mueller probe, Blumenthal must realize that there was no Russian leverage over the president, right? Surely he's changed his tune?
The facts and evidence here are likely to show a lot of criminality, a lot of wrongdoing and lawbreaking that is not indicted here.
Okay, he was a state attorney general, by the way. For our second entry, let's move on to Mad Maxine, shall we? Now, do you remember what she said back in 2017?
This president and his allies, I believe, and others believe, colluded with the Russians to undermine our democracy. And we're not going to stop talking about it. All I know is this. If he thinks he can stop me from talking about impeach 45, he's got another thought coming. I am not intimidated by him. I'm going to keep saying that we need to impeach him.
But what is she saying now? Here's Auntie Maxine yesterday.
He's been saying no collusion, no collusion, no collusion over and over again for a long time now, and he's going to try and conclude that this report is proving that there's no collusion, and you have a lot of his sycophants who will, take the nod from him, and they'll say the same thing. But we cannot allow them to get away with this.
Okay, so let me get this straight, Maxine. So now Andrew Weissman and Bob Mueller are all part of a pro-Trump conspiracy with what, like conservative journalists? Our third entry in the political hall of shame goes to Ben and Jerry Nadler. I mean, Jerry Nadler. How did that get in there? Surely an elder statesman like Jerry has a different view. Here he was just a few months ago.
It's become very clear that the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians in trying to subvert the election. The president is right to be nervous right now because it appears that time is running out when he can hold himself above the law.
Now, we know, though, now that neither the president nor anyone in his orbit was indicted for colluding with Russia. So I bet Nadler sees things differently now, right?
We know there was some collusion.
But none of what you just said has risen to the level of criminal indictment by the special counsel.
No, it hasn't, as far as we know. But we know there was collusion. Why there's been no indictments, we don't know.
You believe the president has obstructed justice. You still believe that?
Well, there have been obstructions of justice, whether they're criminal obstructions, another question.
It just takes your breath away. There was no obstruction found. 2 years of investigation, sir. But of course, he says there is obstruction. What? There's no criminal collusion found. But he says we know there is collusion. What? Fourth on the list, crazy Mazie Hirono. Here she is last year on presidential pardons.
For him to come out to say that he could pardon himself and some of the other outrageous statements he's making, he thinks he's a dictator and a king. It shows that he's really afraid of what the Mueller investigation will show.
So after everything we learned over the weekend, she's doing a mea culpa now, right?
Just because there was not enough evidence for a criminal charge of conspiracy does not mean that there's a very cozy relationship that Donald Trump has with Vladimir Putin.
Now it's the cozy standard. As I always say, being a liberal means never having to say you're sorry. She's just acting like, I don't know, old Eric Swalwell, who frankly makes me unwell. For months, he's painted a portrait of the president that could have been ripped from a Mario Puzo novel.
It's so obvious that they were eager to collude with Russia. Now we're seeing the evidence that there was a conspiracy to cover up.
It's looking more and more, Wolf, that Donald Trump was a part of a criminal campaign, a criminal transition, and now presides over a criminal presidency.
Wait a second. Okay, so after the Attorney General, special counsel, cleared the president of wrongdoing, he's changed his mind, right?
I think the American people want to know whether this president violated conduct, whether he violated not only the law, but that honor code that we all count on.
Wait a second. Now, honor code. Is the president now like a member of a Cub Scout troop? Did he break the law or not? Mueller, after 2 years, said he did not. But Swalwell, like shameless Adam Schiff, can't let go of their old narratives.
I can certainly say with confidence that there is significant evidence of collusion between the campaign and Russia.
There's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
Nope, wrong. There are no grounds to indict him because, as Mueller said, there was no collusion between the president, the Trump campaign, and the Russians. So you did read the Barr letter, didn't you, Adam?
There's still a lot of reason to be concerned about this president's relationship with Russia and Putin.
Republicans should note here the tenacity of these people. Even when they're proven completely wrong, they double down and press their case again and again and again. Imagine what Republicans could do with that kind of commitment. All these Democrats showed hideously flawed judgment, and each and every one of them, though, should face primary challenges. Absolutely. Kellyanne Conway took it further today.
You have Adam Schiff. He believed that the scandal was of a size and a scope probably bigger than Watergate and that there's plenty of evidence of collusion. He ought to resign today. He's been on every TV show 50 times a day for practically the last 2 years, promising Americans that this president would either be impeached or indicted.
These Democrats and many more made a cataclysmic mistake. They spent countless hours on TV giving speeches. They were pronouncing the end of the Trump presidency, literally accusing him of seditious behavior. Now, I don't think a lot of them even believed what they were saying, but they didn't care. Hating Trump became its own competitive sport on the left. And in the meantime, Trump kept pushing forward, growing the economy, appointing great judges, trying to untangle red tape, kill regulations that suffocate expansion and innovation in business. But the Democrats, well, they left their own party unattended. Although they did well in the midterms, let's face it, and they won back the House, a lot of that was anti-Trump stuff, fed by the Russia falsehoods. Substantial, workable ideas were few and far between. Well, what did this do? This created a vacuum, ideas vacuum in the Democrat Party, which left the door open to socialism, which the freshman radicals walked right through. So what did 2 years of bashing Trump really get them? Even after the Mueller report, they're threatening more hearings. But otherwise, Democrats are on the defensive, with infighting in their ranks, fending off charges of anti-Semitism, as their new young radicals embrace collectivism. As for President Trump, he should take this moment as an opportunity to reset and relaunch his presidency. Free of the albatross of the Russia investigation, it's now time to take it all into high gear. Strike a good deal with China, if one can be had, get this border sealed, build as much of that wall as you can, task ICE to find those illegals already subject to removal orders and deport them. That, in and of itself, will have a great deterrent effect at the border. Show the country that the left wasn't just wrong on Russia. They were wrong on just about everything. Go to the inner cities, go to the blue states, expand this movement. Show your heart, you're charming. And have fun. Winning is fun. Now, gloating won't get you reelected, and neither will the Mueller report. But your record of success, properly framed and explained, that will. Which may be the best reckoning of all. And that's The Angle.